Okay, all right. This is the 11th year that we've had a summer school, and for the most part it's been a totally good experience for everyone in every way. Now, all of the presentations are done by probationers of the Rosicrucian Fellowship, and they are about the Rosicrucian philosophy and how the Rosicrucian philosophy points to reality. It is the reality that is important, so we do not become too doctrinaire and locked into the philosophy. Now, different people present different things according to what they find important or what they are studying in the Rosicrucian philosophy now. And as usual, I hog as much of the time as I possibly can. And each year I take a different topic from the Rosicrucian philosophy. Now, after 10 years, I was thinking that I should go back and do the same ones over again, because there are always new people, and they were based on very fundamental things, like building the soul body and how we work on the desire body and things like that. But somehow I got interested in this new topic. But the idea will be the same as it has always been, that there are 10 talks, and the 5 talks in the morning are about astrology. But the talks in the morning parallel the talks in the evening, which are pure philosophy. But usually there is as much or more philosophy in the astrology classes as there are in the philosophy classes, because that's more interesting, obviously. And the topic for this year is unconsciousness. Several years ago, we did a summer school where there were 10 talks on consciousness. And I thought I had done enough of that to introduce people to the topic of consciousness as it is seen in the Rosicrucian philosophy, like through the evolution of consciousness and things like that. But then I decided, for the first time in 40 years, I'm going to do, in the regular school year, I'm going to be doing an advanced astrology class. And the advanced astrology class is going to be called Astrology, Psychology, and Mysticism. And it will use the horoscopes of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. And the idea is to go recapitulate everything that has been done in all of the earlier courses, the 4 courses that precede an advanced course, only redo them, looking at them from the point of view of Freud or Jung. So that if you're looking at typologies, whether somebody's cardinal, fixed, or common, or fire, earth, air, or water, see what that would be in the psychological estimations of Jung and Freud. And then see what they point to in the Rosicrucian philosophy and other mystical philosophies, but primarily the Rosicrucian philosophy, and just develop all the way through in that manner. But when I started looking into putting the course together, I realized that Freud and Jung did a lot with what they call the unconscious. And when I started thinking of that or pondering on that in preparation for the course, I realized that there is a lot about unconsciousness in the Rosicrucian philosophy and what part it plays in our whole evolution, our whole becoming of divine beings. So I decided to put together these 10 talks as a preparation for all of that. I thought it would be a good summer school. Now, since we have only, these talks are designed to be about an hour in length, and we have only 5 of them, so what we do is not going to be comprehensive, and it's not going to be deep. It's just meant to convey a few simple astrological and philosophical ideas, and then we can work it out for ourselves on our own. Now, in preparing these, it's exceedingly difficult to find horoscopes of famous people and be intimate with their psychological information. It's very hard to find that. So in some cases, I had to stray a little bit distant, or quite a bit distant, in order to get to the topics that I wanted to get to. In any case, just look at this as sort of an adventure. We're going to try to look at all things adventurously, and I'll try to remain cogent in all of it, but when there are no real promises about that. Since a lot of people are new to this, we always go back to the basics when we start something like this. In astrology, there are 5 basic elements. The first element is the constellations and the fixed stars. The Rosicrucian philosophy teaches that the fixed stars, which are only really relatively fixed, are the bodies, the outer bodies of very high divine beings, such as the God of our solar system, which Max Heindel says is the aim, purpose, and end of everything that we do. So the sun is a fixed star. As divine beings, the fixed stars emanate creative light, and everything comes into being out of that light. The building that we are sitting in is crystallized light, so to speak. And a plant, it's very obvious, it takes sunlight and it is crystallized light. Or if it's something like a tree and we burn the tree later on, we release the energy that has come from the sun. All the divine beings, according to the Rosicrucian philosophy, evolve just as we evolve. And when they evolve to a certain point, their consciousness is spread out cooperatively with other fixed stars, and they act as constellations. And as constellations, they become wombs for new stellar or new solar systems. Now, in the Rosicrucian philosophy, as given by Max Heindel, we don't do a lot in practical astrology with the fixed stars and constellations. Primarily, we look at them over long periods of time relative to our local system here on Earth in the precession of the equinox, and we look at the constellations as being the source of focus for the divine hierarchies that are working on us in the cosmic evolution. To some extent, we use a few fixed stars or nebular spots in astrodiagnosis, such as Antares is used for either positive or negative clairvoyance and things like that. The second basic element of astrology is the signs of the zodiac. They are called the intellectual zodiac or the tropical zodiac, just as the constellations are called the natural zodiac or the sidereal zodiac. The signs are derivative from the constellations. They are divided up along the sun's path, not according to the fixed stars, but according to the point of the vernal equinox, when the sun, as seen from Earth, appears to be right on the equator and afterwards moving northwards. That point is called the vernal equinox, and that is also called the beginning of the zodiac. The signs, as opposed to the constellations, the signs are fields of attitude. each sign has an attitude, and or actually many attitudes, because each sign is a whole and each sign has a mythos. But all of the signs have some degree of specialization in them. For example, if we take Aries, Aries specializes in courage. It doesn't always have a lot of compassion, but it has some, and it's not what you would call a standard kind of compassion. Whereas if we take something like Pisces, Pisces has lots of compassion, but it doesn't always have the courage and the bravery that Aries does. So each of the signs of the zodiac, while being a complete whole in itself, has a slant on things. The third basic element of astrology are the mundane houses. We call them just the houses for short. And the mundane houses are relative to the place of birth at the time of birth. The heavens are divided relative to the midheaven and to the ascendant, and they're divided up according to various schools of mathematics in which people swear that theirs is the only true system of making houses, and each generation has a new system of making houses, and they all swear theirs is the best. It's one of those kinds of things. There are scientific trends like that. The houses are called mundane because they relate to mundane conditions of earthly life. The houses do not represent fields of attitude, they represent fields of opportunity. We have the opportunity to make money, or like myself, the opportunity to lose money, or to make friends, or to be socially prominent, or to have children, or have a really good married life, or things like that. Those are the kinds of opportunities that are given by the houses. Now, the houses, like the signs, have many facets to them. For example, like the fifth house rules the opportunities to have children, or what you're going to do about children, but it also rules speculation, and it rules play, and it rules expression. And it's very difficult. There is nothing. I've studied a lot of astrology for a lot of years, and there's no reason to know why one house will mean one thing in one chart and another thing in another chart. I have propounded that question to quite a few astrologers, and none of them has an answer to that. So the houses deal more with forms, and the signs deal more with life. So if you consider the signs like juice, like apple juice or lemon juice or grape juice, each sign having its own flavor, and the houses are like the vessels, like glasses that will hold that juice. Combinations of houses and signs show what kind of flavor is going to be given to what form of opportunity. The fourth major element of astrology is the planets. And the planets are definite manifestations of qualities from the signs. Each planet has a back and forth relationship with the sign that it is said to rule. Or, the other way of looking at it, each planet is ruled by a given sign. It is such a thing that whatever is happening in a given sign affects the planet that it rules. Or anything that happens to a planet affects the sign that it is ruled by or that it rules. So this is a back and forth relationship. So the idea of rulership in astrology is a key idea, that many things you can't look at the horoscope directly, you have to look at it as much indirectly through rulership as you do at the direct thing where a planet is placed. Now this makes a pretty complicated thing. And for many people, astrology is not their cup of tea. It gets into a lot of complications, and it's one of those things that you can get lost in studying more and more astrology, and then pretty soon you're studying astrology and not reality, and you're not looking at people's lives. You're all involved in complexity, and there are a lot of people that study astrology that get lost that way. So each planet then is a specialist. The planets are like people. This is something that you want to etch into your consciousness very deeply. Each planet in your horoscope represents one or more people. Like you have a Saturn person who may be your wet blanket or who keeps you honest or something like that. Or you may have a zany Uranus type of person in your life, and so there are planetary people. Now anatomically, Max Heindel points out, anatomically we are like the animals, because our physical chemistry makeup is very similar. But in consciousness and in spirituality, we are like the gods. So we are of that nature, and the planets are of that nature also. They relate to the spiritual life of the signs, while at the same time relating to the forms of the houses. So they are, you might say that they are the foci of bringing the qualities of the signs into the houses. Using our pictorial analogy, you might look at them. They are what pours the grape juice into the glass, and gives that kind of consciousness. Now, each planet is a specialist. Like if you take Mercury, Mercury is like a human being that is mind and nothing else. It is, the specialization is that strong. They have other things in them, but the thing that they specialize in is their basic essence, and that's what they're known by. Venus is like a being that is all love and nothing else. So the planets in this regard then are like organs in a body. The lungs do one thing, the liver does another, and each special function accomplishes specific things. The signs, by ruling the cusps of houses, are sort of like doorkeepers. The planet that rules the cusp holds the key to getting at the information that is in that house. Whereas a planet that is in a house is like an appliance that is in that room or in that house. For example, if you have Mercury ruling the 12th house, the mind is the key to understanding the superconsciousness, the opportunities for superconsciousness that a person has. But if you have the moon in the 12th house, that is a focus of how the superconsciousness is going to come into your life. So that if Mercury rules the cusp, the mind opens the door, but in order to get at the meaning of that, the moon, which rules imagination, it would come through imagination. So when you put things together like this is what you're doing when you're trying to read into the nature of a horoscope. The fifth element of astrology is the aspects. And the aspects are significant geometric relationships between planets. And they have mathematical meaning. They have, morning Eddie. They have mathematical meanings, and they have mechanical meanings, all sorts of things like that. Now, we've just said that the planets are the movers. They are the doers. The signs radiate qualities. The houses receive those qualities, especially as they're focused through the planets, which are the movers. They move through the zodiac. They are the doers. But the aspects are the tools that the planets use to accomplish what they need to accomplish. So the conjunction is something like a needle. It's all the forces are focused down to a point in order to make a breakthrough or to start something new or something like that. The opposition is like a lever. It gives you a leverage. One side goes up, the other side goes down. However, if we have our consciousness, we have both sides. There's sometimes a lot of vacillation in oppositions. The square is like a block. It's like a building block or a testing block or a measuring block. Sometimes it can be such a thing as a mental block. But sometimes it is something that you can build on or that you can see what you're worth. The trine is like an inclined plane, whether it is a staircase that allows you with ease to go from one level to another level, or whether it is the beveled edge of a knife. All of those are trine qualities. The sextile, which is a little bit more complex and a little bit more faint in its manifestation, is a reflection. It's sort of, you look at things reflectively. The best example of how the sextile works is if you look at a kaleidoscope. Remember kaleidoscopes where you look through that tube and there are the crystals in there and you turn the tube and they all change. That's basically 3 mirrors, and that's all it is, and it is a reflection of things so that you're seeing the same objects from various different points of view. So the sextile is like that. It allows you to expand. It allows you to reflect. Like if you take the case of Richard Wagner. Richard Wagner was a great musician. But in order to build his opera house, he had to reflect his consciousness into acoustics, which means that, you branch out and you learn from different studies that are reflective of others. Now, the relative significance of all of these elements of astrology, the 5 elements we've spoken of, is different. And this is something that's really important in life, and it's really important in astrology, that things have relative significance. Some things are more important than others. If you're out in a boat and the boat is sinking, what do you throw out? You don't throw out the child, you throw out something that's of not as great a significance, and even though it may be the same amount of weight. So there are relative significances to each of the elements of astrology, and there are relative significances to each between the elements themselves. And in the order that we have presented them this morning, the lowest significance was stated first. Most of the time in daily life, the fixed stars and constellations are of low significance. The signs are of a little bit more significance, but not always. But even more significant are the daily opportunities that come from the houses. But the 2 most significant things, if you want to be able to have a proportional understanding of character, are the planets and the aspects. These are the most important things, such that if you pick up the horoscope of a stranger and you're never going to see that stranger again, and they say, "Tell me something about myself." This may be somebody who doesn't know any astrology and doesn't believe in astrology. If you look at the strongest positive aspect and the strongest negative aspect, and just say a few words about those two things, the person will be very impressed. Because you'll always hit on the probably the weakest point and the best talent that the person has in life. That relative significance, this is a good demonstration for yourself. For years, I was open to the public as a bookstore, and people would come in and they'd say, "Will, would you look at my horoscope?" And I looked at enough horoscopes of complete skeptics, and you don't just address the sun sign, you address the strongest aspect and the planets that form it. All right. We're wanting to get at what psychologists call the unconscious, which is a little different than what it is for spiritual students and for astrologers. The signs of the zodiac and the houses are divided in different ways. The signs of the zodiac are divided by polarities, positive signs and negative signs. And they are divided by attributes, cardinal signs, fixed signs, and common signs. And there are other divisions such as the elements, fire, water, earth, and air. But the houses are also divided in parallel ways. Since there is an analogous derivative of the houses from the signs, you would expect common divisions. We're trying to get at the unconscious and the opportunities that people have for getting into and understanding what is going on in the unconscious. So we want to look in opportunities, we want to look at houses. And in looking at houses, we're looking for opportunities for the things that are not normally seen, the things that are secret. Even with a horoscope, some of them are hard to crack because they're so hidden. So, we're trying to get into places in which there is a lot of what is called psychological resistance. In astrology, the houses can be divided in a way that is parallel to the way the signs are divided into elements. There is the first, the fifth, and the ninth, which corresponds to the fire signs, and the first, the fifth, and the ninth represent opportunity for education or expression. The first house is on-the-job training. The fifth house is just pure expression. You express yourself in your children or something like that. General education is the fifth house. Higher education is the ninth house. The second, the sixth, and the 10th house are called professional houses. The second house is income, materials, things like that. The sixth house is labor, or skills, or conditions of working, or other people that you work with. While the 10th house is professionalism. It is whether you manage or whether you are a professional like a doctor or a minister or something like that. And it's the way you distinguish yourself in the world and people look up to you. The 3rd, the 7th, and the 11th houses are houses for opportunities for understanding interhuman interactions as equals. The 3rd house is relations with brothers and sisters. We all, when the pie gets cut after it's been baked, everybody wants an equal share of it. And the way parents strive to have equality among children is indicated by the 3rd house. The 7th house is counterparts, partners, business partners, but especially marriage partners. You're equal, and each one needs the other one because the other one represents something that they are not. And the 11th house is friends. friends are always equal. There cannot be one friend being a better friend than the other, because if there's that, there really isn't friendship. It gets broken down that way. The houses that we want to get at are the 4th, the 8th, and the 12th. They represent opportunities to see things that are normally unseen, things that are invisible, things that are to some degree unconscious. And that is how we're going to spend the entire week, is looking at opportunities to get into the unconscious part of our being, or the unconscious part of the cosmos to us, by astrology. And so we're going to look at those houses. They're sometimes called mystery houses. We're going to try to look at them in a much more personal way than that, and it's difficult. We just don't know about the intimate things of other people, especially famous people. We really don't know what's going on often inside of them. Only what comes out do we know. Often we don't know what goes on in our own personal unconscious. And to some extent, with our friends and people that we associate with, there's a lot of ethical delicacy about probing into their personal sphere, that, the part that they keep true to themselves. To get around these difficulties, I have resorted to sometimes very indirect inferences to get at people's consciousness, or how to see the astrology to do that. So as a consequence, these talks might sound like anything about anything but unconsciousness. As usual, there are going to be various and sundry thoughts about all sorts of things, because a lot of curiosities come up when you look at a horoscope. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to look at only very small parts of these horoscopes. It's suicide to try to do the whole character at one time. It usually takes, in a class, about 30 sessions to go through an entire horoscope. All right, so we're going to begin this morning and tomorrow looking at the 4th house. Since we're focusing on houses, we're focusing on opportunities. Among other things, the 4th house represents opportunities to be in touch with what some psychologists call the personal unconscious. The personal unconscious is the repository of a person's undissolved and undigested personal experience. Usually from this rebirth only, though sometimes people do bring personal things along from past lives. The personal unconscious contains memories, habits, impressions, unfulfilled dreams, personal symbols as opposed to classical symbols, and a lot of other things. And whether we realize it or not, the personal unconscious is live and very often very active. Now, from the perspective of the spiritual worlds, the personal unconscious is different from the general or the macrocosmic unconscious. And for Rosicrucian students, the difference between the personal and the general is very much like the idea of the macrocosm and the microcosm. For example, Max Heindel speaks of the subconscious memory And when he speaks of that, he's talking about the panorama of memory that is in the negative pole of the reflecting ether of the vital body. The personal panorama is stored in the reflecting ether of the body, and we can get in touch with it, but very often we do not. Some people have what psychologists call an eidetic memory, but which is basically, in street language, a photographic memory. You can look at it just like looking at a movie. Now, it's very important in this to keep in mind that these memories carry a lot with them. It's live, and it has a desire component to it. Things that we have that we haven't digested in ourselves are highly charged. Max Heindel tells us that when most people leave the body in full waking consciousness the first time, they are cowered by all of the entities that they have produced that they haven't dissolved. And those entities come back with a vengeance, because some of the things we put out to other people are not nice things. This is one of the reasons why retrospection is so important. Because in the retrospection exercise, we discharge a lot of things that are in our personal unconscious. And not only do we get the essence of the experience, we free ourselves from carrying around a lot of loaded guns that we can trigger down. Other people can trigger off, or we can trigger off on ourselves. This is one of the reasons that, hard as it is, practicing retrospection is probably the most important thing that a Rosicrucian student can do, especially if we want to have direct, first-hand spiritual experience and be able to see things from worlds that are more worlds of meaning and less worlds of form, like this world is. Some people are more aware or affected by influences from the personal unconscious, and others are not so much affected. So, with this in mind, I tried to focus on people who are aware of the fact that there's something that goes on in their unconscious or in their personal unconscious. So what I did is I started by looking at people who had sun and or moon in the fourth house. Because usually if sun or moon is strong, it's easy to detect those things. The idea would be that these would be people that would also be putting a lot of their attention into the personal subconscious, and it would show. I was only modestly successful. The first horoscope we're going to look at is a horoscope of somebody who is one of the most famous neurotics in the United States. And it's not bad to be neurotic. I think every spiritual aspirant is a neurotic because it's part of growing. You have to adjust, and when you have to adjust, it's in yourself that you're adjusting. I once knew a minister that said he thought that the whole spiritual life was passing from one state of neurosis to another. And he was right. Because if we aren't adjusting to things that are not right in ourselves, we're not growing. And when things are not right in ourselves, we're neurotic about them. This is somebody who has probably spent more money on psychiatrists to probe into the personal subconscious or the personal unconscious than most of us, all of us together, will see in our life. This is somebody that sees a psychiatrist sometimes every day, and not a cheap one, but a very rich... I
was just thinking of Woody Allen. That movie.
All right. We see here Neptune in the first house which means a sensitivity. Carl Jung, after a whole life of working with neurotics, went through all sorts of different things to understand what neurosis was, and in the last paper that he ever wrote on the subject of neurosis, he came to the conclusion that the primary thing that produces neurosis is sensitivity. In our case, it would be spiritual sensitivity, and that's exactly what we find here. So Neptune in the first house is enough to indicate neurosis. Then, if we add Virgo rising, another likelihood for neurosis. Probably of all the signs of the zodiac, Virgo and Gemini are the most likely to be neurotic, though all of the common signs pretty much have that tendency. Then if we look at Neptune, it's square to Mercury, who rules the ascendant. Saturn is square to Mercury. Almost exactly, 431, 401, and just Saturn square Mercury alone is enough to produce neurosis. So what we have here is a World's Fair of neurosis. And then you throw in the Sun and Jupiter in that square, and you've got something really tough. Now Max Heindel tells us that sensitivity is a consequence of a loose connection between the vital body and the dense physical body. And he says there are several major reasons why this occurs and a number of minor reasons. One of the major reasons is that some people have refused to incarnate deeply into the physical body. And so they have a sensitivity. And it is a neurotic sensitivity, except that it is an escapist sensitivity. These are people who want to escape coming into the physical world at all. They're considered an illusion because they're all tuned into the inner worlds, without realizing that unless you bring something to finality, you're not going to get anywhere. The other class, major class of neurosis, is people like ourselves. We have gone through the physical world, we have paid our dues, and now we're starting to come out of it. And as we come out of it, we develop more soul material, and we get focused into asking questions. We are more sensitive, and we all want to leave this world and understand the meanings, not just the forms that we have here. People who are perfectly incarnated into the physical world are not sensitive. And a sign that you can tell that they're not sensitive is if they listen to a talk like this, they say it's all crazy talk, because they don't have that intuitive sensitivity to know that there is a truth behind the things of the world. And for them, they're honest. They're saying that's crazy. I can't believe that stuff. So we're trying to pass out from that. And as we pass out, we're sort of metastable. We're not always stable beings. Some people are on the verge of clairvoyance, and sometimes their clairvoyance is in control, and sometimes it's not in control. The involutionary sensitivity and clairvoyance is, you can always tell that anytime there's something fearful is when it gets awakened. So, questioning why are things as they are the sign of somebody who is sensitive that is trying to come out. And Mercury square Saturn is asking questions. Why? However, this is a pretty materialistic person, so the answers are more just for relief. And Woody Allen obviously realizes there's something going on in his subconscious as much as he can as an atheist. He's a proclaimed atheist, but he knows that there's a subconscious something of us. He's perfect for Freudian psychoanalysis, because psychoanalysis is, Sigmund Freud was himself an atheist. And Sigmund Freud thought just to relieve the stress that's in the unconsciousness is all that's important. Saturn in this horoscope is opposite the ascendant. 2-degree orb, pretty close, pretty strong, and shows he has doubts about his own personality, as well as having mental doubts. And with Saturn square the Sun, he has doubts about himself in total. This is a man who has humility. If you ever, if you ever see him in his full demeanor, he's humble. And he's humbled because he has been humiliated. That's not the best way. He has the opportunity. The Sun, Jupiter, and Mercury are in Sagittarius, and the true path to humility is when you realize that there is something so much greater than yourself that you see yourself in relative significance or in relative proportion, and you are humbled immediately. Most people, if they had the opportunity to be out of the body for just a few seconds and see all of the divine beings and hierarchies of divine beings that are beyond us, would immediately become humble, and all the self-importance and puffed up grandiose notions would disappear rather quickly. He questions his familial background, because the 4th house is family background. And he questions religion. Sagittarius is on the cusp of the 4th, and those planets are all in the 4th house. So in some respects, he's similar to us. He's interested in divine things, but because he has all of the doubts, the negativity of the doubts closes him off to seeing the positive side of spirituality. Orthodoxy wasn't satisfying to most of us, and that's what brought us to the Rosicrucian philosophy. We sought for questions, we asked questions, and we sought for answers, and we, in the Rosicrucian philosophy, have found answers. Something that answers to our intuition, and the lights go on, and sometimes in our consciousness it's like popcorn. One thing pops after another. We're humbled daily because we can't live up to our aspirations, and in that way, our ideals, we're humbled before them, and that way Woody Allen is that way too. I'm convinced that that's why he is as creative as he is, because he's continually humbled, and that keeps him open. So this is a case of too much questioning and closes him up. Now, Saturn forms a reasonably strong square to Jupiter. And Saturn is under judgment, and Jupiter is over judgment. I just thought of something. Nobody should be parked on this side of the street. Oh, you got a ticket?
No, I learned that lesson last years.
Okay. Tomorrow you can't park on the other side of the street, but on Mondays you can't park on this side. What?
I wonder if it's Elizabeth's car. It's a red car.
Yeah, I was going to put a sign on the door, but I got so many things going on that I forget about doing it. Oh. So there's no charge, but you're getting a $25 lesson.
Yeah.
35? Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah. Every hour you get another $25.
But please remember, tomorrow not on the other side.
I'm on that side street, and that's Wednesday, Thursday problems.
Yeah, this is a man that reads the signs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Get confused.
Yeah.
Richard, he has an exact opposition of Mars and Pluto,
Yes.
which rule the 4th house.
Yeah.
He's a sexual predator par excellence.
I don't believe that,
Okay,
Redcliffe.
well, that's what I see.
Okay.
Oh, because of the...
We're coming to
He
something.
does have that T-square with Venus and Mars
It's born
and
out.
It is not borne out. The district attorney of New York City investigated and could not find sexual predatory. And could not. There was nothing that he could be.
First of all, he's obsessed with sex.
Oh yes, okay, yes. That's true. But all right. So he has Saturn and Jupiter square. So he has poor judgment. So he's probably not asking the right questions. And when the Sun is involved in that same square, he's questioning his own self-worth. So we can see the danger in this horoscope by looking into the personal unconscious and doing so with too much negativity. You set a trap for yourself. Now the square represents test and measurement. And Saturn seems to indicate that he tests and measures himself relative to his partners. And his poor judgment is indicated in his partnerships. In almost everyone, if not everyone, that he has had a partner, he's always been older than the partner. His current wife is 35 years younger than him. But it's been a 23-year marriage, and she's certainly old enough to leave if she wanted to, so I suspect that they both quote that it's a successful marriage for them. Now, he does have unregenerate sexual passions. He's got the Mars square Venus, which is a highly sexually active person, especially someone who thinks that he's fallen in love and that the fulfillment of falling in love is sexual relations. Fortunately, the moon trines Venus, and that trine between Venus and the moon is stronger than the square between Venus and Mars. And obviously his aesthetic is indicated by the trine. He has exquisite artistic taste. He makes very, very good movies. And the proof of the pudding in there is even after he's broken up with women, the women are willing to work with him professionally because he is such a good director and understands them. So in an artistic way, he understands women, but relative to himself as a partner, he's blind, and with that blindness, he can't see things clearly. Is he a sexual predator? I don't know. I don't think so, but...
By the way, the Venus is on the star of the artist. The fifth star of the artist.
Okay. All right. That's as much as I have to say about that horoscope. But it's a good example of someone probing into the personal unconscious. Now, we have only a few minutes left because these talks are designed to be only an hour long. Now we're going to look at something very different. It's also about the fourth house and also about unconscious influences of the fourth house. But the influence isn't always psychically obvious. It is the influence of heredity and family tradition. These are things, or there are things in the constitution of our dense physical body that come from heredity and that come from family background. You know, in a family you begin to look like each other, even if somebody was not born into the family. You know, husbands look like their wives and vice versa. These are things that affect our functioning in the world. They're probably part of cause and consequence relations, but one is not always sure. In terms of hereditary things, I am utterly astounded at how many conditions I have in my physical body that are things that my father complained about. Every complaint that he had right down to the, like arthritis in the right shoulder. Only in the right shoulder, and that's what my father had, and it comes down that way. So I don't know if we all shouldered people in past lives or something like that, but that's what it comes to. It's not just a matter of unpleasant conditions. Sometimes it relates to our ability to do things. Like right now, the darling of the National Basketball Association, his father was a expert at three-point shooting, and now he's the greatest three-point shooter in the league. I forget his name. What's his name from Golden State Warriors?
Steph Curry. Yes.
Seth Curry, yes. And he's a deadeye. He's what is called a natural. And there are things that affect us that way, hereditary factors. But the other thing that comes from family is things that are built into our personal unconscious. Something that we don't even remember as incidents, that we just grew up with it in our environment. Whether we realize it or not, we give ourselves to our parents because we love them and they love us, and our survival is dependent on that. But they radiate things into us because they are what they are. Every human being is radiating their character, but in the sensitivity of a child or of an infant, the influence of that radiation is very strong. Now, if you analyze your own life, I've looked at my life, and the strongest characteristics in my life in terms of the way I live and want to live are things that radiated from my parents. They tried to teach me things, and those things had influences also, but they aren't as important as what radiated. Like, I am very service-oriented. My father was very service-oriented. When I was a little child, somebody said he hadn't served them right. And he came home and he was crying. And when you're a little kid and you see your father cry, who is the powerful person in your life, that radiates into you. And that was that kind of influence is very strong. However, even though this is parallel to the way that the spiritual hierarchies radiated their being into us, we have to evict the spiritual hierarchies. We cannot be free people unless we free ourselves from everything that has made us what we are, so that we are our own being. We do this through creativity, and we do this through passing it on to the beings like the plants and the animals and the minerals that we are hierarchies to, but this has to be done. And in our personal lives, as we are becoming free, we have to throw off familial, especially parental influences. This is where rebellion comes from. When we reach puberty, we're reliving the Lemurian epoch, or we're reliving the moon period in recapitulation, and we rebel. And that rebellion is extremely important, because that's when we're coming into our own, and the only way we can be in our own is to throw things off. Now, some people are more conscious of this than others. And for just a very few minutes, with saying almost nothing about it, this is a person who was extremely conscious of throwing off familial influence for something much more impersonal and much more friendly. Does everybody know who Stephen Gaskin is?
No.
Stephen Gaskin is a self-proclaimed radical hippie. He was famous in the Summer of Love and the Haight-Ashbury district. He gave a class that was called Monday Night Class. And hippies by the numbers came to that class and eventually turned the class into a book that became a classic. And the people were really inspired by him. And they were people who were looking for freedom because he was a freedom seeker. In this case, we have the Sun and Mercury and Saturn in the 4th house. And the Sun and Mercury are in Aquarius. And Aquarius is freedom seeking. And all of these planets sextile Uranus in the 6th house. And Uranus rules the cusp. So freedom and living altruistically are very, very big things in this person's life. After a few years of giving this class, all the people decided to put it in action. And they bought 60 buses. And they traveled around the country gathering people who wanted to help enact the Monday night class. And they picked up people until they eventually settled in Tennessee. I know a man in this neighborhood that was looking for a really nice New Age girlfriend. He says, I can't find them. Stephen Gaskin has taken them all and put them on the farm. It was called Stephen's Farm. And a big part of Stephen's Farm was getting rid of undue personal family connections. This is, Uranus, Aquarius, both are impersonal. And so they didn't want to have all of that personal connection, things that are too much radiated from the parents. So what they did, at the same time, they tried to produce free love out of this. They were very strong on marriages, but they had first regular marriages. But the children were raised collectively, not individually, and they were raised impersonally. Then they had marriages of 4, where 2 men and 2 women would be all collectively married, and they all had to live in altruistic equality with each other. They went up to 6, marriages of 6, but I don't know if they ever got to marriages of 8. Stephen Gaskin is no longer active on this plane. But they did that. They did a lot of midwifery, and they experimented a lot with agriculture, especially with scientific means of working with soybeans. And they did a lot of earthquake relief in South America, and they did very, very good things. And they provided midwives for anybody anywhere in the country that they wanted them. They had traveling midwives, and they would come. So this is just a do-it-yourself kind of creative new way of trying to clear the personal subconscious so that you could live altruistically. It's a very simple principle. It's a very simple, there are other things in the horoscope, but it's a very simple mechanism or a very simple way of showing what they tried to do. Now, I have met some of the children. A couple of children have come by the bookstore over the years, and I was impressed. They didn't think it was dogmatic, but they did think that the living and growing up on the farm was authoritarian. And they were duly rebelling, which I consider a healthy thing, because that's what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to produce people who would rebel against things being too conventional. And that's about as much as I have to offer this morning. It's a good thing for seeking for freedom and being relatively successful in it. We'll look at some more horoscopes. We'll even look tomorrow at Sigmund Freud, his horoscope in relation to the 4th house. Now we'll close with the Rosicrucian student's prayer. O God, increase our love for Thee, so that we may serve Thee better from day to day. Let the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in Thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Well, you got 2.5 hours.
Gaskin's character, who's also homosexual, he was using this whole New Age thing
Yeah.
to permit his sexual freedom.
Yeah. But I don't want to go into all
I know, that's
Yeah.
what I'm seeing there.
Yeah.
That's two people with Mars and square Pluto.
What's that?
Those are two charts with Mars square Pluto.
Yeah, or conflicting with Pluto. The first one was Pluto opposite, yeah.
Did you record that, Richard?
Yes, in fact, it's recording right now, including your question.